I'm Francesca Donnellan. Welcome to Becoming More Human, the podcast. Every generation, through its arts and creativity, explores the same questions. Who am I, and what really matters? We are so often taught how to emulate others, to make other people happy. But how do we access what's good for ourselves and be strong enough to actually claim it? It's a constant practice because we all keep evolving. There are no limits to personal growth. You can start your journey today and get closer to discovering your true self. Give back to the people around you and make the world a better place. On today's episode, I'm talking with Alexandra Lunn, the founder of her own design agency based in London. Alexandra started her love of design as a little girl, roaming around her dad's wooden workshop in West Yorkshire. She would accompany him to demolition sites of the old mills in the north that were being pulled down. Everything within the mills was meant to be burnt. However, they'd salvaged the wood and the cast iron objects, and her dad used the materials to make floors and furniture out of the reclaimed timber. The idea that you can make something out of nothing inspired Alexandra to step into the world of design. Alexandra runs a small team of strategists, copywriters and designers. She has built her business from the ground up. Throughout this episode, we take a deeper look at personal branding and what it means in today's modern world. So enough from me, and let's jump straight in.
We specialise in creating really bold and vibrant visual identities that help our clients to stand out from the crowd, and that also includes a lot of personal branding, more recently especially. And our kind of niche isn't that we work for one particular business or brand. It's we just create really kind of out there designs for all of them.
And we are going to deep dive in today into personal branding. I feel that it's something that affects so many of us in this modern age that we're living through, helped by the social media craze, whether it's Instagram or LinkedIn or your TikTok profile. Personal branding is out there for everybody to see, and it's something that we can't really get away from. Have you seen a rise in personal branding versus sort of business branding over the last sort of couple of years?
Yeah, definitely. I think that people really want to, they know that it's a necessary evil, or it kind of appeals to our own egos, doesn't it? I think it's that's another side of it. So when at a networking event or even just out and about, people will ask you, what's your Instagram, or are you on TikTok or something like that, to keep in touch. And it's a genuinely I like you, I'd like to, keep in touch. But there's a level of that in my mind anyway, that's just a bit darker.
How would you describe personal branding for anyone who's sort of struggling to grapple with the idea of where we are all brands in that sense?
Good question. Back in the day, when a farmer had a cattle of sheep, he would brand them with a hot iron. And I guess that basically is what branding is. It's I look like this, I feel like this, and I want to communicate myself to the world in this way, in this light. I'm talking really about businesses, and then that's now seeped into how we interact with ourselves and how we as people are promoting ourselves in this digital world. So I think that personal branding is a mixture of your personal identity, who you are, who what you stand for, what your values are, and then dressing it up and sharing it on social media in the way that you wish to be perceived. And I think that's a really important key point. And also just going back to the idea of who you are, a lot of us don't really know. We're all trying to figure it out. So I think that's where there's a lot of conflict too, because that can really lead to an almost existential crisis, I think.
Yeah. Do you think we all need personal branding in order for social media to connect to one another?
In a word, yes. I would say that though, because that's my job in a way, that's my livelihood. I create brand identities and personal brands for people to be able to live. I just think it's so unnecessary anyway to be on social media as a person. Back in the day, if people asked you what makes a strong personal brand or a strong brand, you'd naturally reply the quality of the services or product that I provide and how people interact with my brand and everything else. But now it's taken another level. And I know from personal experience, if you take a few months away from social media, you just feel so much more relaxed, no one's watching you. And whether that's for professional reasons or for your own your own personal account, it's just such a relief, because you're not comparing yourself, you're not attaching yourself to this idiot like tech tool.
That starts to rule all of our lives. In terms of developing a personal brand profile, and as you mentioned earlier, you really have to get under the skin of understanding who that human is and looking at their values. And that's like quite a personal experience to go through versus when you do it for a brand. It's less personal. It's a brand. You can be very objective. You can be, very damning, or no, cross this out, doesn't work. That value doesn't count for this purpose. We can get rid of that. We can be much harsher and tougher with a brand because it's not a human. So when you're going through the personal branding process with a human and you're looking at all their values and what they bring to the world and all their services and how we mold that then into a personal profile that sits on a few squares on social media or sits on a TikTok or sits on a few words on Twitter. How do you go through that process with somebody, and how does that begin to form for you? Because it like you mentioned, it's such a personal experience, and I'd imagine it could be quite challenging at times.
The beauty of it and what makes it easier is that it's a brand. Like the core word is brand. So with any like business or personal brand, we're always starting off with strategy. So we're getting aligned on the client's goals, values, and like mission and all of those key things that kind of like build them up. And there's a level of like trust and rapport that's built together with myself and the client. So I'm spending a lot of time with them at the beginning, kind of like, it's a huge kind of like daunting process to go through as well. Like a lot of people find it quite cringe, but they know that they think that they have to do it. And so it's a lot of like hand holding, getting to know them. And then through that, we end up with like a brand Bible. So it's usually done over a half-day workshop or a couple of hours workshop. So we will like compile everything into like a PDF called a brand Bible, so that there's the client's pain and gain points, as in what their client's pain and gain points are. For example, with Natalia Sergeyevna, she's a psychoanalyst. So like people who are her clients might feel a bit lost. However, after working with her, they'll feel like more connected and strong and all of those things. Likewise, if it's Spice Company, their customers might like not know how to cook, but they need the right spices. And then once they use the product, it's like, oh, great, I can make a dish now. I feel like I know what I'm doing in the kitchen. So it's like having that as a rock and just focusing on the brand, really, because you can't control so much of the stuff, but you can control how you want your brand to be perceived. And that's where there's a level of kind of superficialness to it. And I don't think that any of my clients would mind me saying that, because although what we're doing is with the aim of being authentic, like the world in which we live, going right through to politics, like Donald Trump, Rishi Sunak, everyone who's in a top position right now, they've got this level of charisma that's allowing them to be in those positions. And I think if you haven't got that, like I'm not sure if John Major would fit in to today's world. So it's that like personal brand thing that you need to be really dynamic and exciting. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it, that we are in the world where this now really sells. And do you find picking out emotions from people? So it's like, well, actually, we need to really dial up this area, the happiness part, or we really need to dial up the intensity part, or we need to balance the opinion, of somebody. If you're too opinionated, it might scare people off. And they're quite like emotional parts of somebody. Then you have to start to feed back. Have you found yourself having to look into that kind of depth when you're building a personal profile?
Yeah, for sure. We separate, like once we've done that strategy work, we'll separate the brand into like key pillars. Yeah. So for example, with Natalia, it's like community and education could be one pillar, and then another could be connection, and then another just education and advice. So having that as a kind of framework is really, really helpful, because if you feel like you're getting super intense about one part, you can just take the brakes off and like focus on another. Video is a huge thing as well. In answer to your question though, I think when you're giving advice and it's like very much your own kind of like thought leadership, I mean, everyone's entitled to their voice. I always advise to just focus on giving to the audience. Like whenever we're designing anything as well, be that like logo, color or type, it's always like, what do the audience want? Because that's ultimately where you're going to make revenue from. So I think that those interactive features on Instagram, like when we're building a brand identity, it's like we're always thinking about how this voice, how the client can ask questions to their audience to keep them engaged. we wouldn't do the ongoing support, like the, scheduling or posting, because of the ongoing nature of it. It's very like, need this yesterday.
Yeah, it's intense.
Yeah, I just prefer the strategy work, because that's where you get to dig deep and find out how to communicate that person or brand to the world.
And you mentioned earlier about the dark side of some of the personal brand building sort of process. What have you experienced in that kind of guise?
I just feel that the way in which we're promoting ourselves now is so superficial and so harmful to our mental health on a subconscious level. So we might not know how it's impacting us, but we know that we're doing things in a certain way. Like, I bought this top from an online brand, and that's like, would I have bought it otherwise? Yeah. It's like we're being so influenced in ways in which we might not otherwise be. And that's, I think, it really is that these tech giants have got a huge level of control. And when you do go and try and raise anything with them, it's just impossible. They're living in this ivory tower, and they're almost more powerful than governments now.
Yeah.
So that's the dark side of it, I think.
It's part and parcel of what we know as our day-to-day life, though, is being sold to without really realizing it.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I mean, there's always been advertising, so good point.
Yeah, now it's because of social. It's right there for all of us to click within 2 or 3 clicks. We're purchasing rather than seeing something in a magazine. I know, starting out my career in communications, you would tell somebody you'd see something 3-4 times before you go and purchase it. But now I think it's like 18 times or something before. We've got so many ways in which we can view something. And I guess in that instance, there's so many ways we're comparing ourselves and judging ourselves and looking at our own profile and thinking, do I fit that mold? Do I fit within that type of brand? Or does my profile relate to that? And I think we are seeing the rise of sort of micro influencers as well as a result of this, and more people wanting their 5 minutes of fame, regardless of somebody building a business around themselves. Have you seen more people who just are building a brand on their own profile with nothing to sell, so to speak?
Yeah. I feel like we're totally brainwashed. And now if you ask children like what they want to be, I think there was a study done recently where, the majority, it's not a lawyer or to do something basically useful for society. It's to be an influencer, because they don't just want the 5 minutes of fame, they want the life of fame. For what, really? And then I think David Bowie said, like, oh god, I wish that I never, I wish I thought about this before actually getting famous, because then you're kind of like, I know that it's a different level as well, because like when you're an influencer, it's like you're getting given things and it's all like, shiny and sparkly and selling this lifestyle. It's not being known for being really talented at what you do. I think that it's all feeds into the same beast. Yeah, exactly. And it feels like a beast at times, doesn't it? There's so many people you say they're having a break off social media, and these are people who are usually quite prolific on it as well. And you do wonder the impact that building that personal brand every single day, every hour, they're constantly thinking about what they're putting out, has some kind of subconscious effect on their mental state. Yeah, definitely. The first thing that we look at when we wake up, and oftentimes the last thing that we look at when we hit the sack, and it can't be good. Because we're getting, advertised to that late at night. It's not natural. I guess that's it. It's just not natural. It's just the way that we're designed doesn't include social media to be part of that. Yeah, of course. I think we are designed really to be out in nature more than we are to be sitting on our devices. Yeah. And then if, you do go out in nature, there's this pressure almost to take a picture and a video and show people that you're out in nature. And that level of it, I really don't understand. It just feels wrong. Yeah, it kind of depicts the idea that we're not being present in that moment, when being in nature is all about being present and teaching us to be present. Yeah, exactly that. And I know a lot of people go out on walks, and a lot of people don't subscribe to any of this. We're just really talking about our world here. Yeah. I think living in London, the fast-pacedness of it, and it being a tool to use. If you use it as a tool and just for those specific moments, then great. I think you've nailed it. But if it's seeping into other areas of your life, your personal relationships, everything, then I think that you've got a problem. Or it's not really you as an individual. I think like collectively we all have. It's just the world in which we live. And there's Instagram now for like 13-year-olds, isn't there? Designed for the younger generation, and that's already training them to like be like us in terms of how they're using it. But there's no getting away from it, because even if that app wasn't around for younger audiences, they'd still see their parents. If they see their parents reading a book, they're more likely to, you know, copy that behaviour. But when you look around on the tube, obviously everyone knows that it's just everyone's staring into this vortex, and they might not be on social media, they might be writing an email or reading an article, but it's just this like that everyone's doing it, so it makes it so much easier for you to then dive into your own like narcissistic self-obsession, which I think I have as well. Like, I'm not joking. I think that like without wanting to, and I hate myself for it sometimes, like when I am like reaching for my phone, and if I take an evening off or a weekend off or something, I do sometimes like really want to go for it, and it's like a huge addiction. And that's what I really don't like, because that's when you know that you're not using it as a tool, but it's using you.
That's interesting. When you say you can feel that seeping in for yourself, do you feel that you're asking your boyfriend or your friends to take more photos of you to make sure that you're being relevant and you're adopting those things, or are you just scrolling endlessly?
I wouldn't. I feel that's like another level that I haven't yet crossed, or hopefully will never cross. But just the wanting to go for it and wanting to look specifically for that orangey red gradient. That just to see what's there, like for no reason. If you're bored, you know, like, or if you've got time to kill, if you're on a break at work, instead of smoking, you might go for a scroll through Instagram.
Do you have any tips for somebody who's wanting to build their personal brand?
Think about what's true to you, and think about the brand element more. What do you want to achieve? Where do you want to be in a couple of years' time, 5 years' time? Think about your audience first and foremost. Like, what do they want to see and hear? And just don't get too obsessed with it. Like, just don't take it too seriously, because if you take anything too seriously, I think that you get stupid. So it's really that.
How do you advise clients though when they are trying not to take it too seriously, but then they log on and they instantly are comparing themselves and they want to be similar or to create similar stuff that they've seen from other people? Is that an ongoing management that you have to kind of be mindful of and stick with your plan and not to deviate?
The beauty of what we do is like the strategy and then the visual design, and then it's up to the client how they want to use that. So we just essentially give them the tools and templates. So we work on Canva and Adobe Express so that they can have these easily editable templates to use and then create their own content. It's really outside of our control or hands then, and I don't particularly like doing the ongoing stuff, but we would refer them to like a really good social media freelancer who can then like maintain their ongoing profile. And usually the ones that we refer share the same values as us, so it's about doing things in an efficient way and reaching the client's goals and objectives. So it's not emotional then. I just, you know, always advise to clients to not take it too seriously and just post as and when, but that's not really my responsibility as a designer to help with their ongoing, like how they use this tool. Otherwise that would be a whole other job. That's more the role of a business coach to like help manage that relationship with the client and then their online presence.
How did you get into personal branding?
I just fell into it, but more and more people are asking me to do brands for their self.
Alexandra, in terms of the future of where personal branding is going, where are we going to end up? Because Twitter is already being torn down. You know, there are reports online, you know, that Instagram might not even be here in the next few years. We're already being told Facebook is, you know, redundant. Who's using that platform? And obviously there's a lot of skepticism around TikTok because of the ownership of that and how private your details are. So whilst it's a huge account, you know, how much growth will that continue to have? So when we've just nailed our personal branding and, across one platform, and then suddenly we find in the next couple of years it changes, how do you see this working out for us in the future? Are we just going to keep chasing this idea of personal brand building, and is it going to get wildly out of control, or do you think we'll end up giving up with it and throwing it in the bin?
I can imagine it being really disappointing for an influencer who, ever since they reached age where they could work, that's been it for them. They've put everything into building this personal brand and profile. They've got like thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers, and then Instagram is no longer relevant. Then what do they do? Did they build enough financial capital in that time to use later on in life as well? That's a huge thing. I think that the way that we're perceived now online can show this very shiny, glossy version of what's going on, and then our bank accounts might not reflect that level of luxury lifestyle.
Yeah, that's interesting.
To answer your question, I'm just really not sure where it's heading. All I know is that it seems to be getting worse. The tech giants have more power. Privacy is just out of the window. We've got no control over it. Even when you're leaving a review on Google, that's all part of the big beast, isn't it? It's all connected. So although we might be talking about Instagram or TikTok specifically, it's the whole network. Yeah. I think that one of the best things I did last year was to have a personal phone and then leave my business phone with all the apps on it out.
Oh, I love that. What a great idea, Alexandra. That's fantastic.
Yeah. It was great, but I didn't know where I was going because I'm so reliant on the app. With the maps, for example, where you've got that little navigator.
You took that off your phone.
Wow. Yeah, literally just back to basics. But just having a personal phone, with family and friends, to have their contact details on it, and it was really refreshing. And actually, it was good not knowing where to go. You just have to ask people or use a real map. That's the level of where we're heading. I think we're getting more and more stupid because it feeds into the whole AI thing as well, isn't it? AI is just taking over and getting more dumbed down as time goes on. That's the way that I see it heading, but I might be wrong.
Well, that's the way. I hope you're wrong too. I think that's the way we're led to believe, at least, it's going, and that everything's going to be taken over by robots, which would be a great shame. We need human contact. We need humans to do human jobs. We need to feel connected to one another, and we can't do that if we're buried in our phones all the time. It's a really refreshing look, actually, at how we can make some changes. Just getting another phone that we use for personal reasons. It feels so obvious. It's funny when you said that, because when I started my career out in my early 20s, we'd always have two phones. We would have our personal phone because it was a fairly new concept, and then we'd usually have a BlackBerry that work would give you, and that would be your life. And you'd go out for dinners, and people would slam two phones on the tables, and it'd just be mental. And then it's, in some respects, it's a godsend. Sometimes I think I'm so lucky I can do so much on my phone, but I've never looked at it in the sense of, am I addicted to this phone? I'm reliant on this phone. It's got all my emails. It's got all my contacts. It's got my life is on that phone. I can literally do my job. I've never looked at how, even when I think on a Sunday evening, I'll put my phone down, and my husband usually pulls it out of my hand and says, "Come on, a few hours of downtime." I've never considered really looking at how I go beyond that, and how we can start to get back to who we really are by not having our phone, by not being reliant, by not constantly checking, whether it's where we're going, where we're eating, looking at reviews before we even get to a restaurant. All those things, it's become second nature. And I love that idea of fully disconnecting, but without, having to turn your phone off forever, which is what I feel like so many of us feel like we need to do, but we obviously just can't. So this idea of getting closer to ourselves and having more time by not being glued to our phone, because often we think we have no choice, but actually you've just given people the most perfect choice.
You're giving your loved ones a much better experience of yourself, and it's much more nourishing, isn't it, if you're connecting with them on a much more deeper level. And I think that it does come down to your own self-discipline and organisation. So where, you mentioned that we just can't I think it feels like that, but actually we can, like, we really have the power to just turn everything off and focus on the here and now, especially at the weekend or basically during your personal time. That's when you really can do that. I wish that I actually practiced what I'm talking about now, because I've kind of like, I did it for a while, but I've kind of dipped into taking the easy route. So the easy option is to like be a little bit more mindless and just like go with the flow. Because when life's so busy, it is really convenient. Like, we've just been incredibly busy recently, and it's so much more convenient to just have this one phone and like wake up to it, like do a few emails just before, or scheduling a few emails, which I love, you know, just before dinner or whatever. And I think that is so much more fun to be had. And you know, when you look back, when you get to a ripe old age and you look back, you don't want to be thinking, I just wasted my life on social media, or why did I care so much about what people thought of me? I think that's my friend. She's a mental health psychologist for the NHS up in Manchester, and I remember part of her training was to be on the phone as a Samaritan and to talk to older people. And the main thing that they said when she was asking them about, like, what do you wish that you did differently out of life? Or sometimes she wouldn't even have to ask, but they would always reply, I wish that I just didn't care what people thought of me. I wish I just did things for myself a bit more, and spent more time with family, didn't work so hard. So I think all of those like really key values are much more doable to achieve when you're not on your phone.
And do you have your own set of values?
I think that's it. Yeah. Just on a personal level, like spend more time with friends, family, doing things that make you feel more wholesome, long walks in nature. In terms of values, like, just be a good person, whatever good means to you.
In terms of the good side as well of personal branding, do you have any advice to people who maybe are feeling a bit caught up in personal branding? You know, they're sort of caught between a rock and a hard place and don't really know what to do with it. Yeah,
I think focus on the good for sure. So a photographer recently came to us. He's had a prolific career working in advertising. He's like the go-to person for food and lifestyle. However, he's really struggled with the fact that there's a lot of younger photographers who call themselves photographers, and I'm not disputing that, because, you know, everybody is now that we've got a phone and we can hold a camera up, but they might not have been trained in the way that he was, you know, like with lighting, all the technical aspects that you need to use to hold a camera, yet they're getting really good gigs with like Gucci, Prada, like huge high-end brands. I'm not saying that they don't have any technical skills or abilities at all. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that they're very new to the game, and social media has enabled them to basically make a similar income as my client, who's been, you know, slogging hard at it, has like, he knows his craft inside out, and he's been working with some prolific brands. So the good side of this is that we can design a gorgeous like social media style guide for him that allows him to just post as and when a project is completed, and also for his assistant to follow the rules in which we set to post, and then that will result in him having more of the same work. So just use it as a tool. That's a positive thing for sure. We get, I guess, like 40% of our business through social media. When I ask people where they heard about me, it's, I've been following you on Instagram for a while. So I do feel like it's a bit of a necessary evil, and I think that you can still like go to sleep at night and look back on your life feeling positive about it all if you used it as a tool. I'm not saying that I'm there yet, but I'm striving for it. So
it's a really interesting way, sort of definition to look at it in terms of having that separation, so you're not so emotionally connected with it. Has there been sort of a time in your life over the last sort of few years you've been doing branding and personal branding that you see come up time and time again in terms of the challenges that you face with branding or building a strategy? Is there, especially around the personal side, is there things that pop up for you with working with real life humans rather than a brand that you have to try and tackle? And do you find that you become more than just doing graphics. You seep into life coaching or, therapy type, you've really got to get under their skin, I guess.
I work with a lot of small businesses at the moment, so startups, and there's something so lovely about like helping a business owner get from like just having an idea to having a gorgeous brand identity and sharing it with the world. And like, there's nothing more satisfying than seeing them kind of like thrive and knowing that they're doing well thanks to some design work that we've done. When it comes to those kinds of clients, there's like a group of them that I think are so emotionally invested in it. I'm not saying this is everyone, but like they're like, it's their baby, and it's totally understandable that they've like got so much emotion attached to it. Yeah, they are like another level. Sorry. So sometimes I just like really want to help guide them and handhold them, but I can't wave a magic wand, and I'm also not there to be yelled at.
Yeah,
that is a thing. I think because I'm quite friendly and open and like collaborative, and I think sometimes there's something to be said for being like a cold, hard businesswoman, like very emotionally removed from it. But I guess the nature of being a good designer or creative is that you are quite sensitive and emotional as well. So I do like to be there, like from the start, kind of like nurturing those relationships. But then when something isn't going right with a client, then it can mean that they almost take it out on you. And I'm really, it's such a minute percentage of people. But then at that point, I just have to like, end the relationship, or like figure out a way of making it work for both of us, and like just setting up those boundaries again. So boundaries is a huge thing, isn't it, for anyone in business? Like, we've been talking about it all morning, boundaries with social media, like how you're switching off. So it's just that, really.
For anyone who's listening who's thinking, I really need to sort my Instagram account because actually I'm doing some great work. I need to do more and I need to get on board with it. I've dabbled with trying to get my Instagram sorted, trying to get the personal brand profile out there, but it's just kind of not clicking. Is there any sort of things somebody could try to just at least start getting themselves off the ground and a bit more sort of tuned into navigating that personal image on their Instagram?
Have the essentials in place. So think about you as a person, write down some keywords, like what emotions do you want to evoke for your like personal brand. So that could be like energetic, enthusiastic, happy, positive. Then you're going to want to like look into color theory a bit. So choosing colors that represent those core keywords. So Indian yellow is a very optimistic color. You might like, just because you like pink or purple, don't put it in. Like think about like what the key colors to represent these emotions are, and then like work with tone and contrast to build a palette that looks really gorgeous. Obviously, this is much easier with a designer, and we've put together recently a package that allows people to get things off the ground quite easily. And then the same with typography. So type can express the quirks and spirit of a brand really, really well. And there's so many gorgeous, like license-free fonts out there. And it's just about typing them all out in your name, like your full name, or a shortened version of your name, your personal brand name, and printing them out and just sitting with it and thinking about what you prefer the most. And then that really is like the basics of how you can create a brand narrative, like without any investment or money.
Oh, I love that. I think that's an easy way to start developing a bit of a personal brand. In terms of, so one question we always have on the show, is there been anything that has really inspired you in terms of a book, a TV program, a quote, anything that's in relation to what we're kind of talking about, or in relation to your life, that has really stuck with you?
Don't worry, be happy.
Don't worry, be happy. I love that. Yeah.
I think that's it. Like sometimes when you're taking, again, things seriously, just like, focus on the good. Or if you want to not have that because it's a bit too sweet, literally just focus on the good, because life's too short. And that's something that my like best friend, mentor, teacher would always tell me, just focus on the good, because there's so much good, like whether that's a project that you're working on or stuff in your personal life, like you can really emphasize that.
And that's so interesting. I think that's where people get stuck a lot in building their personal brand, because you're often falling in the gaps of judgment of yourself to others rather than thinking, what am I offering to the world and what does the world need to know about? And that's the good part. So we have one final question on this show, and that is, what does becoming more human mean to you?
I think it means caring and being genuinely curious, listening. It's a huge, huge thing, like really listening to what other people are saying, actively listening. So being in the present and not always seeing things from your initial perspective and not always acting on your gut. I think that's going to make you more empathetic and like a better communicator. It's all about communication, isn't it?
Yeah, that's so true. That's a lovely place to end. Thank you so much, Alexandra. It's been lovely to have you on, and I know you'll have helped at least one other person listening to this and looking at their personal branding. So thank you so much. I'm Francesca Dinellen, and you've been listening to Becoming More Human, the podcast. You can follow Becoming More Human on Instagram, subscribe, rate and review the podcast on your podcast apps such as Spotify, Apple, Amazon and Google. And don't forget to check out our website for exclusive audio content on becomingmorehuman.co.uk. Join me next week for another inspiring conversation. Thank you for listening.